Hi, I'm Damon Fairless. It's been over 2 years since police found 4 people frozen to death, just meters away from the U.S. border in Manitoba. RCMP confirmed all 4 were Indian citizens, and that they were all from the same family. Since then, my colleague Stephen and the Fifth Estate have been searching for answers about the smugglers that sent the Patels into a blinding snowstorm. It's an investigation that's revealed why migrants hoping to settle in the U.S. are first coming to Canada and then making dangerous crossings, and how the promise of a better life for their children may actually put those children at risk. Today, Stephen D'Souza is here with me, and he's got the latest on the Fifth Estate's investigation. Hey, Stephen, it's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So I remember when this story first broke. It's one of those stories that sat in my gut for a few days. And I kept thinking, like, how the hell did anyone lead these 4 people, his family, the Patels, into this situation where they died? So I want to go back to January 2022, the U.S.-Canadian border. There'd been really severe weather, right? Blizzards, it was minus 35 overnight. It's really desolate there. And the U.S. Border Patrol has just found 7 Indian nationals who crossed over a field from Manitoba, heading towards the U.S. border. 5 are still on foot, and they say they've been walking for over 10 hours.
Yeah, hi, this is Eric from Border Patrol Radio. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Can we get an EMS sent to the gas plant on the 410 there? We got an alien that's suffering from hyperthermia.
And then the authorities think there might be more people out there. So why did they think that?
So of this group of migrants, one of them was carrying a backpack, and none of these migrants spoke English very well, and so communication was a challenge. But what they saw in the backpack immediately gave them concern because it was filled with children's clothing and diapers. And it was immediately obvious that there were no children in the group. So right away, they began a search because they knew there were more people out there. And the search began sometime around 9 in the morning. And it was about 4 or 5 hours later that they made the tragic discovery of the Patel family just on the Canadian side of the border.
Well, 5 feet into Canada, there was 3 of them. I didn't see the instant.
Oh.
Little baby and probably about a 9 or 10-year-old and their father.
Oh.
They found another body over by the Canadian gas plant here.
Oh, my.
That walked away. So there's 4 up here total, I guess. When I came up here and stopped blowing snow,
Yeah?
and I glassed along the bank there, it looked like a dirt clump. I said, well, I better walk over and take a look at it and see what it is.
Uh-huh.
Sure enough, yeah, it was 3 of them laying there.
Oh.
So before we get into the investigative work that you and your team have done, I want to talk about the Patels. I want to know, what do we know about them, these 4 people who tried to make it to the U.S.?
So there's Jagdish, the husband, and Vaishali, the mother, and then their 11-year-old daughter, Vahangi, and then 3-year-old Dharmik. And they came from the state of Gujarat in India. And from all accounts, it seemed like they were living a pretty normal, comfortable, middle-class life. Jagdish had worked as a teacher. He'd also worked for his brother's clothing business. And the father owned some land. And so they had a pretty decent life. And so it appeared that things were going well for them. But in that part of India, there's a great pressure, societal pressure to leave. Because essentially they look around their village, they look around the other towns, and there's rows and rows, entire streets in some cases, of people who have left to go to the United States. And so what they see then is those people posting on social media about the great lifestyle. They see money flowing back to the families back home in India. And so all these families see is, wealth and status being gained from leaving to go to the United States. And they think, why not me? I want to give my children a better opportunity, so maybe I should do the same thing.
So back in 2022, your team found Jagdish's parents in a small village called Dinguche in Gujarat. And it was a really remarkable interview. It was really emotional. Jagdish's mom was crying the whole time. His dad was obviously, broken, I think. And so when you guys talked to them, what did you find out about Jagdish, about his motivation for leaving with his wife and their 2 kids to come to the U.S. through Canada?
Yeah, they were incredibly emotional. In fact, the parents had not really given a lot of interviews willingly to the media. And our team, it took a while even to just gain their trust to get into the home.
उसकी तो कोई बात ही नहीं था। कोई लड़के की कोई बात नहीं हो, हमारा पूरा ख्याल रखता था। पूरी हो गई हमारी जिंदगी पूरी हो गई।
They did the interview, our team on the ground in India did the interview in sort of the main sitting room of the family's home, and on the wall was a picture of the Patel family. The picture that, if you've seen the story, read about the story, you've probably seen this photo of the family all dressed up with a green background.
Yeah.
And the father talked about how his granddaughter was really good at studies, and that Jagdish had told him that they were going to Canada to give the kids more opportunity. And according to the father, he didn't know that they were going to go to the United States.
सत्तीस का था तो सब मेरे को तो कुछ ये क्या करता है क्या नहीं करता है, जो कमाता हो उसके पास रहता।
In their mind, they never knew that that Jagdish and Vaishal were going to make this journey.
जाने को लोग बोलता है तो लोग जाए, कोई ना नहीं बोलता है। हम जैसा ना बोले तो कोई हमारी बात नहीं सुनेगा।
So one of the things that I was wondering about is if the Patels wanted to go to the U.S., why did they come in through Canada and then try to get to the U.S. illegally? Why not just apply to come to the U.S. through legal means?
That was one of our biggest questions as well, and we weren't quite sure what the answer was. So we went to an immigration lawyer named Deepak Alawalia, and he's interesting because he's from Brampton originally, but he now works in California, and he's actually dealt with a lot of migrants who've made the illegal journey into the United States from the southern border through Mexico, but also through the Canadian border, some going actually through the same crossing in Manitoba. And he helped us understand exactly why migrants don't take the legal route.
Just to put into perspective, if that immediate relative were to sponsor their brother or sister in India as of today, they would wait 25 to 30 years to actually get to the United States.
25 to 30 years?
Correct.
Not months.
No, 25 to 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is part of the problem, that it's not as easy or simple to make your way to the United States through legal means, and which is why we have this system where a lot of the smugglers actually thrive because they know the need is there.
So that's just simply not realistic for many people. And then the reason they come through Canada is because they can get a visitor visa to Canada.
Right.
And so that gives them easy access to the country. And at that point, they haven't really broken any laws. And then smugglers will be there to tell them, this is an easy journey. Just fill out some paperwork. We'll take care of everything else. And before you know it, you'll be across the border in the United States, living your best life, giving your children those best opportunities, and it'll be easy, no risk for you at all. Just hand over some money.
So let's talk about that, getting across the border. Your first doc for the Fifth Estate on this came out in October 2022. And at that point, what do we know about how the Patels got from Gujarat, India, to that snowstorm on the border of Canada and the U.S.?
So this was about 10 months after the family's death, and there was still a lot police didn't know about the family's path. What we did know is that about a week before they got to the border, they arrived in Canada at Pearson Airport. They were picked up by a private vehicle, and some of these details actually came out as a result of our documentary in October. The RCMP actually credited our documentary with generating some tips. And so what we learned was that the family had stayed at a hotel in the Mississauga area, just outside of Toronto, and then they were taken to Welland, Ontario, again, just south of Toronto.
Near Niagara.
Closer to Niagara Falls. And then they were shuttled back and forth. And then somehow they got from the Greater Toronto area to Manitoba, to the border.
And that's a blank spot, right?
And that is the black hole in the timeline. It doesn't appear that they took a commercial flight. And, the drive would take about 20 hours. And if you can imagine anyone who's driven with kids, trying to do that drive in the middle of January is not an easy task. And so there was still a big question about how they actually got there.
And that kind of brings us up to this new branch of investigation that you guys have done. So at that point, you didn't have a lot of answers about who was responsible for putting the Patels in this awful situation. There'd been an arrest, but that was on the U.S. side. There was a U.S. guy who had been accused of picking up migrants in the U.S. and when they arrived. But then in January last year, you got this breakthrough from the Indian authorities, right? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So in January 2023, right around the first anniversary of the Patel's death, state police in Gujarat announced that they had arrested 3 men. And these 3 men, they say, and they accuse of being part of the human smuggling network that took care of the Indian side of the journey. And so that was a pretty big deal on one hand. But then on the other hand, what was really important for us was that Indian police named 2 suspects that they believed facilitated the Patel's journey on the Canadian side in North America. And they gave us 2 names. One was Bittu Paji, the other was Fennel Patel. Now, the challenge for us in looking at this was that Bittu Paji, Bittu is a nickname.
Okay.
It's not a real name. And so Indian police, as we learned later on, don't know his real name. And so it didn't give us really anywhere to go in terms of investigation. Fennel Patel was at least a starting point. The challenge for us is that Patel is like Smith
Super
in Gujarat.
common,
So
yeah.
it's like looking for Jack Smith, or John Smith, and you do a search, you get the phone book.
Right. So I want to ask about how you honed in on one of those guys, but first I want to go back to what you got from the Indian authorities. Can you lay out what were the exact charges that these 2 guys were charged with in India?
Yeah. So the charges they would be facing are culpable homicide, not culpable homicide not amounting to murder.
Just like a manslaughter.
Yeah,
charge.
so attempted culpable homicide, human trafficking, and these are charges that the prison terms range from anywhere from 3 years to life in prison. And so a conspiracy, very, very serious charges, and they're in a section of the Indian Penal Code which says that these are alleged allegations that happen outside of India, but it empowers the Indian courts to still deal with it.
Okay, so you eventually got your hands on some of the police documents behind these accusations. And one of those was a statement written by one of the other 7 migrants who was picked up the same night that the Patels died at the border. This is a guy named Varshal, and apparently Jagdish knew Varshal's father from their village, right? So what did Varshal write in his statement?
Varshal provides a key part of this story in that he places Fennel Patel as part of this alleged smuggling network. He says that Fennel Patel met him in India with his father, helped them arrange the paperwork to come to Canada, and that when Varshal arrived in Toronto a month before the crossing, Fennel Patel was the one, he says, that picked him up from the airport and moved him around through the country and ultimately got him to the border. And he talks about how, and again, the timeline's a bit fuzzy here, but how he meets up with Jagdish Patel and the family, and that he realizes they know Jagdish from back home in India, to the point where they actually call Varshal's father back in India, Jagdish and Varshal, to say, look, we're together. We're going to be crossing together. And in fact, it's Varshal who was the one who offers to carry the clothing, the backpack for Jagdish. So he was the one who was carrying that backpack that
With the
U.S.
toddler's
Border
clothes.
Patrol
Yeah.
found with the toddler's clothes and diapers.
Great. So, and then in addition, I understand you got the full police report from the Indian authorities, and there was a crucial piece of information that you guys kind of scoured through stuff and you honed in on something that helped you find our guy, right?
Yeah, so the police report really laid out their allegations against all of these individuals, the ones arrested in India and then the 2 named in Canada, including Fennel Patel.
Right.
And the key piece of information for us was phone numbers. It listed about 3 phone numbers. A couple of them were international, but one of them was a 647 number, which is
Toronto area.
the Toronto area. So that was sort of a jackpot for us. Of course, we do some searches. We realize the phone doesn't have an address or anything attached, but of course, our next step is to give it a call.
Yeah, so this was an amazing moment in an investigation. Tell me about that.
So our producer, Scott Anderson, called this number, and Scott has a great ability to keep people on the phone who don't want to be talking much longer than they really should be on the phone. But he has a great ability to sort of stretch these calls out. And so somebody named Fennel Patel picked up the phone, and he claimed not to have any knowledge of the allegations we presented.
You in the Toronto area then, or?
Yeah, but sorry, I don't want to talk more, but from where you got my number and why you are asking for me, because I don't know anybody right now.
So we didn't really get much information from that. It was only later on that we learned that he actually had given us a very important clue in that he said we were going by some police documents.
Right.
And we had sort of one version of the name Fennel Patel.
Right.
And there's a middle name and there's different sort of variations. Sometimes the father's name is included in the middle name. We had one variation of the name.
Sorry, you're Fennel Kantibai Patel?
My name is Fenil Kumar Kanti Lal Patel, not Kanti Bhai.
And it was afterwards we realized you just gave us the key to unlocking the vault, because once we had that name, it gave us business records, it gave us an address. We were able to connect the phone number to an address. We had all of these data points that all pointed to an address just outside of Toronto.
Right. And then you basically staked them out for a couple of weeks, right?
So then the next step was go to the address. What can we see? And along the way, we had actually also gotten some photos of Fennel Patel, photos that had never been
old
seen.
Photos, right?
Older photos that had never been seen in India or in Canada. And so we had a sense of what this guy is supposed to look like. And so, yeah, it seems kind of, we parked in front of his house and waited. So that appears to be Fennel, right?
That's him.
That's him.
Yeah.
Where is he?
He's going to pick up the bin.
Green bin.
He's getting the green bin.
Yeah, okay. Got him.
So, and part of that, you guys were taking shots at him. You took photos of him. Then you had your Indian team bring some of these photos to the Gujarati authorities, right?
That's right.
How did they react to those?
So these are, this is an incredibly serious allegation we're bringing against an individual here. And so we wanted to be as absolutely sure as possible. And even if you go in my office now, you'll see I have all these little data points that we were using to connect to this individual. And so we wanted to be sure that the person we were watching was the same person Indian police were looking for. And so what we did was, with our team in India, we showed them the photos that we had, the older photos, and then we showed them the current photos, these surveillance photos that we had taken.
I would just like to show you some photographs of Fennel Patel, which I have. Is this Fennel Patel?
Yeah,
is this Fennel Patel?
Yes. He's Fennel Patel.
This is Fennel Patel? Is that him also?
Yes.
Is that him?
Yes. I think so. I think so. Fennel Patel. I think so.
Mr. Thakur,
Fennel.
this is Fennel in Canada right now.
Oh.
Apparently he is somewhere in the Toronto region.
Okay. Oh, great.
The sort of the higher up in the state police, he confirmed it. And then we were very lucky that when we were doing the interview with him, one of the lead investigators on the Patel case was there as well. So he came into the room, he looked at the photos as well, and he also confirmed that this was Fennel Patel. So that was sort of our moment where we're like, okay, we have the goods here.
You've got confirmation.
We've got confirmation as best as we can do it that this seems to be the person that Indian police are looking for.
So then is kind of the in some ways like the climax of your investigation. It's time to confront him, right? So there's this moment where you literally run up to him, you and your crew run up to him, try to get him to talk. Tell me about that. What was that like?
What we didn't want was for him to see us right away and then turn right back in the house and go and then lock the door and not get a chance to talk to him. And so we situated in a way where one of the producers with a camera was watching the front door, and then I was parked a little on the other side of the house out of eye line.
Right.
And so we had walkie-talkies, and as soon as he saw him come out the front door, realized he was alone, radioed to me, my camera and I got out of our car and sort of bolted down the street.
Go.
Fennel, my name's Stephen D'Souza. I'm with CBC News, the Fifth Estate. Indian police are accusing you of driving the Indian family, the Patel family, to the border. Did you drive them to the border, sir? Did you leave them out there to die? Did you drive them to the cold and leave them behind, sir? And so I met him about halfway down the driveway. He was about to get into his car and he was on the phone. And so I immediately identified myself and started asking him about the allegations. And so immediately, as soon as I mentioned that, he kind of just mouthed the word no, just kind of shook his head and turned around and began walking back into his house. And I just kept peppering him with questions. But the entire time his back was to us and we got nothing.
It seems like, I'm almost certain that someone who's accused of something so serious isn't going to talk to you. But it must have been hard to come away without him talking to you, right?
We subsequently tried calling him. We've sent him letters. So he knows what we're doing. He's had an opportunity to get in touch with us to clear the air. Because if this is just the wrong guy,
right?
If these are just, if we found the wrong person, it would be very easy for him to get in touch with us and say, you've got the wrong guy.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, these are still allegations. Nothing has been proven. But to date, we have not heard or gotten a response from him.
So let's touch on those allegations. With everything you've learned, especially the information that came from the Indian officials, can you clarify the allegations? Like what exactly is Fennel Patel accused of?
So he's accused of being the main agent, sort of the main human smuggling agent here in Canada that helped transport the family as well as these other migrants to the border. And so essentially, he helped coordinate the transportation, the logistics, where they would stay. And so what we have is Fennel Patel being accused of bringing the migrants to this place in Manitoba, this desolate area in January, in farmers' fields, essentially.
Where locals don't go out.
Where locals wouldn't go out in that kind of weather. Yeah. And the accusation against Fennel Patel and this other gentleman, Bithupaji, is that they brought them to this border site, gave them a phone with an app, and essentially said, walk over there and there'll be somebody to pick you up. And the allegation is that they, didn't prepare them with adequate clothing and told them, this is your best chance to live your dreams of being in the United States. And you can just imagine, no parent would want to put their kid at risk like that. But if you're being told that it's just a short walk away and you just look at this phone and the app will tell you how to get there, and you've never even probably walked through a snowstorm before, what other choice do you have?
So let's go back to Fennel Patel. The Indian government wants him for, allegedly being involved in human smuggling. What has the Indian government asked Canadian authorities to do?
This is an area where things get really, really fuzzy, because back in May of last year, there was a report that came out that said Indian police had requested the extradition of Fennel Patel, even though he wasn't in custody yet. And they quoted the same investigator that we spoke with. The problem is that it's not up to the police on that level to make these kinds of requests. Extradition requests are handled much higher, like Ministry of Foreign Affairs level. And so we immediately, back in May of last year, contacted the Department of Justice and said, can you confirm that a request has been made for extradition for these individuals? How does it work if they're not even in custody? Mm-hmm. And all they would tell us is that extradition requests are confidential state-to-state communications. And so we won't know that a request has even been made until it gets into the court system. We repeated our request just a few weeks ago, and again, we got the same response that we just don't know.
So, there's another way of approaching this too. So you spoke with a U.S. immigration lawyer who's originally from Brampton, Deepak Ahluwalia, and he told you, he had this argument, instead of worrying about extradition, that the Canadian police could just go after Fennel Patel, right?
Yeah.
What was his argument?
His argument is that this is a crime that happened on Canadian soil.
There is reason to believe, and there is evidence that this individual was doing all of this in Canada. Well, to be honest, then you don't need India. You don't need the government of India to do the extradition request. You try that person in Canada.
He points to the statement from Varshil Dobi, the migrant who survived, who places Fennel Patel at the scene, places him at various points.
The fact that he is the only one that can place the Patel family with him at the border before they actually decided to make that trek, I believe is a smoking gun and is enough for the RCMP to actually act and go further in this investigation to actually put out an arrest warrant against him without having to wait for any other more information from India or for them to actually make a formal extradition request.
So why haven't they done it?
That's the $1 million question. What are they waiting for? Something is impeding this investigation, and again, we don't know what that exactly is.
His question was, if this was a Canadian family, would the police have already acted? And that's been the challenge for us, is that, and I think part of the reason why we've pushed for the story for so long is that this is a family that doesn't have a voice to advocate for themselves. Like, their parents are living in a small village in India. They don't speak English. They're living with their grief and are trying their best to continue their lives.
So, you've spoken with the RCMP. What have they said after you shared what you found through your investigation?
So after we approached Fennel Patel, we contacted the RCMP and laid out what we had, told them we had found him. And the response we got was, we work very well with our international partners. Our investigation is ongoing and we can't comment any further. And that's essentially a statement that we got 2 years ago. Like, nothing new, nothing even confirming that they're aware of Fennel Patel, that they know where he is or know, anything about him, or that they're following up on the charges from India. And, when we talk to Indian investigators, they tell us that they met with the RCMP back in January of last year when they first charged these individuals and first named Fennel Patel. They met with RCMP twice. RCMP has liaison officers in India. Those officers went to Gujarat and met with the investigators, and the investigators laid out their information, including Fennel Patel's passport information, we understand. And so, by all accounts, it seems that the RCMP is aware of him, but for us, they just aren't giving us any information. And so we responded back with a detailed list of questions, requesting an on-camera interview to try to find out what's happening. And again, all we got was a statement saying, we're aware of the interest in this case, but it's ongoing. The investigation's ongoing and we can't comment.
You've been working on this for a few years now. And I think the thing that strikes me is that this has been a case that's had a lot of dead ends, or there have been these periods where you're not getting information. There's blank spots in understanding how they got to the border, the Patels. And there's been one arrest made in the States, no arrest here in Canada. I guess I'm curious what it is that pushes you to keep doing this work. Well, what is it about this story? What is it about the Patels?
I think part of it was just when I first saw the story, I saw my own family in those photos. I have 2 kids, and the photos that that family posted of their kids, the home videos, those are the same things I post of my kids. And I every morning when I send my kids out to school, I make sure I check the weather, I bundle them up, and make sure I make sure they're as safe as possible. And just to think that those poor children were in that situation, it's heartbreaking. And I talked about just the fact that this family doesn't really have anyone to speak for them.
You'd think that this horrible tragedy that happened to the Patels, that would be kind of a warning, so to speak, for other people who want to cross. That's not the case. If anything, crossings are still happening, maybe even higher than they were, right?
In fact, that's the case. The crossings are higher than they've ever been. People crossing from Canada into the United States, it's happening in record numbers across upstate New York, Vermont. And it's not just people from India. There's, actually Mexicans make up the largest number, people from Central and South America as well. And in large part, it's because people from these countries can get visitor visas to Canada, so they can come here legally and then use Canada as a jumping off point. But even in our first documentary, we visited the region in India, and villagers were telling us, look, in this neighborhood, thousands of people have gone. And one city official even said to us, if I have the chance, I'll probably go too. Yeah. And it's just, it hasn't been a warning at all. In fact, last year, around the end of March, there was a Indian family with their 2 grown children, and then a Romanian family with a small child that they died crossing the St. Lawrence. There was a woman, a Mexican woman, 5 months pregnant, that died last December. So these crossings are happening all the time. And unfortunately, the only time we hear about it is when there's tragedy. And so that shouldn't be the case. And meanwhile, there is a network of human smugglers operating on the ground here, making this all happen and making a lot of money too.
Stephen, it's really great work you guys have done. Thanks for coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.